that they're going to try and have me convicted in, they are no cases. These are bogus cases. So if they go, but what they want is that they will have me convicted, and then when I go to appeal for the higher court, by the time the appeal will be heard, the elections would be over, so I would be out of the race. So this is the game plan, and also put me in prison so that I can't campaign. All I think, my view on this is that what they are trying to do is they will completely discredit our democratic system in trying to dismantle and not allow a party which has over 70% rating in Pakistan today. So the biggest political party in the country with basically almost 70% of the people behind it, if you try and make sure that it is out of the race, basically you're dismantling the democracy of the country. And that's really what they're planning to do. And all I'm hoping is that some sense will prevail somewhere along the line, because all that would do is it will destabilize the country. The country desperately needs stability, which will then lead to economic stability. But all what they're trying to do is actually, it's going to cause more destabilization. But there's a panic amongst those who are in power that somehow, whatever happens, I should not be in power.
Well, one of the things I was reading that came out in the last week that made me laugh was that you were accused of being a secret Israeli agent. Is that right? And I was thinking about secret religious things. Barack Obama was accused of being a secret Muslim. Indian politicians have been accused of being secret Christians. When I first visited Pakistan, I was accused by Indians on social media of being an ISI agent, which is obviously. Wouldn't it be easier for all of us just to switch countries instead of maintaining, secrecy in our countries?
Look, Jeremy, the problem is someone like me, they really find very difficult to place me. So at one end, I've been called, and a whole election campaign against me was that I was part of a Jewish lobby, a Jewish conspiracy to take over Pakistan. And then a whole campaign, Taliban Khan. So I was, a supporter of Taliban. And then a whole campaign for last few years, I was pro-army as school, and now I'm supposed to be anti-military. So I think, people find it easy to categorize people before maligning them. So, it depends where you stand in the political spectrum. Then accordingly, then they brand you like, Jewish lobby and so on. Point is, the saddest thing is that, my God is Rabbul Alameen. He's God of all human beings. And our Prophet, Muhammad, peace be upon him, was a mercy for all mankind, not Muslims. So, universal religion. To bring people together, human beings together. And, very narrow-minded people.
ब्रेकिंग न्यूज से आपको आगाह करते
चीनी है, ये देख रहे हैं आप, ये आधा किलो चीनी मुझे 55 रुपए में मिली है. उन्होंने कहा जी किलो नहीं मिल सकती, आप आधा किलो खरीद सकते हैं. चीनी इतनी अवेलेबल
चले के वफाकी.
So you find, non-leaders dividing humanity to come into power, whereas you have someone like, our Prophet, peace be upon him. The first constitution of Medina was where all the various religions were brought together by him. So Christians, Jews, Syrians, they're under one millet or one community. And they all had their rights, and all the rights they were allowed to practice their religion and so on. So it was a very advanced civilization that was set up in the state of Medina. And I find it, people like Nelson Mandela, for me, these are genuine leaders who actually brought human beings together, because people like us who saw I used to play cricket, and South Africa then was apartheid state. And I played with South African cricketers. And I always thought that one day there would be bloodshed in South Africa. But it was a leader who actually stopped the bloodshed by forgiving the ones who, 27 years of his time in jail, and then he comes back and forgives everyone. So these are genuine leaders who bring humanity together.
Yeah, I was speaking to some of my friends in Pakistan who are Christians, and they're also supporters of you. And one of the things they brought up was that Christians in Pakistan, I've always found this interesting, that the percentage of Christians in Pakistan is the same as the percentage of Muslims in the United States. It's about between 1% and 2%. And one of the things they were concerned about was, Christians in Pakistan being a minority, often being scapegoated by, neighbors and things like that, that they rely on the rule of law in Pakistan to protect them. And the, recent events have made them a little worried.
Well, look, Jeremy, look, what distinguishes a civilized society from a barbaric society? The Romans used to call anyone, the Romans had their laws, and everyone else were called barbarians who didn't have laws. So a human society and an animal society, the only difference is law of the jungle is might is right, and human society is only human if it has rule of law where the weak are protected from the powerful. Now, unfortunately, Pakistan has descended right now into total lawlessness. Might is right. In order to try and sideline me and my party, basically, all fundamental rights have got suspended. And, when that happens, basically all the weak people become vulnerable, all weak sections of the society. So rule of law is what I started my politics 27 years ago. I was inspired by England, where I went as a teenager. And for the first time, I saw rule of law, meaning that the powerful were also under the law. Whereas I had come from what was then martial law, where you had military rule, and military rule by definition violates rule of law. So therefore, I was inspired where, the prime minister also had to go by the rules. And, recently you saw Boris Johnson actually losing his premiership because he broke the law. So, these are alien concepts right now in Pakistan. And that's what I started 27 years ago. And my 3.5 years in power, my biggest problem was that unfortunately the army chief at the time just was patronizing these powerful people who wanted to be above law. And I wasn't strong enough because I had a weak coalition government with a small majority. And I just wasn't strong enough to implement rule of law. And by the way, unless you have, in a parliamentary democracy, unless you come in with a proper public mandate with a huge majority, I don't think it's possible to take on the powerful mafias who put themselves above law.
I'm turning this over to Safina, who has a question.
Hello, Mr. Imran Khan. As you just mentioned about the whole campaign against you, basis on religious and Semitic comments, and that reminds me of Asif Khaja's interview in New York on September 27, 2017, that he actually stated that PTI in New York, PTI is a religious fringe, while he are more liberal. And I have been observing like Pakistani news that Shiri Rahman and Asif Khaja again recently labeled you as an Israeli agent or Jews agent or son-in-law of Jews, which I can see that there is another campaign is going to be run by them. Well, I just want to ask, can Pakistan ever establish a system to register these anti-Semitic comments as a hate crimes, like with appropriate consequences? Because every now and then we see them using all type of these campaign against you, which really against you or anybody else in Pakistan.
Look, Safina, look. First of all, when you have people, politicians who have no ideology, the only ideology they have is any which way to get into power. So that means that they become chameleons. So Khwaja Asif would go and tell the Americans he's liberal, whereas his party members here would be talking about, the extreme sort of spewing hatred against other sects, other religions, or they would be calling themselves backing jihad, and jihad not because they believe in jihad. Jihad is a great concept, means standing up against injustice. But they would use it sort of as a religious, as trying to categorize themselves. And they change colors wherever, whatever audience they have. And Sherry Rahman, her party claims to be very liberal, and they talk about liberalism and so on. And yet, here she is making such comments because them in Urdu, didn't make them in English because she didn't want, the Western countries to know, what she was saying, these anti-Semite comments. Look, what I want Pakistan to be, let me just make it clear. The Pakistan was made to be on the principles. Our founding fathers made Pakistan to be on the principles of the first state in Islam, which was in Medina. That was in every sense a modern state. It had rule of law. Number one was rule of law. Remember, just imagine at that time, forget about, even now it would be unthinkable, but at that time, a Jewish citizen wins a case against the Khalifa, which means the head of state, Hazrat Ali, one of the most revered figures in Islam, because the judge refuses to accept the testimony of his son. So all citizens, regardless of their religion, were equal. And secondly, the head of state they put themselves under the law. So the Prophet, peace be upon him, is famous saying that even if my daughter commits a crime, she will be punished. The Khalifa, the second Khalifa, Hazrat Umar, he had his son punished for breaking the law. And so, the state was built on great principles of rule of law, everyone equal, regardless of their religion. And secondly, women were given rights. We don't realize that was the first time women were given inheritance rights at the time. The Prophet saying that man has right over woman, as a woman has right over man. So, imagine at that stage, and then of course, freeing the slaves. Slavery was, first time the Prophet spoke about how you have first to treat them equal, but the best thing is to free a slave. Now, these were, at that time, dynamic concepts. And unfortunately, and then of course his last sermon, where he said, we're all children of Adam. We're all equal. Whatever the color of our skin. So remember, these are 100 years ago, great concepts, modern concepts. But sadly, sitting right now in Pakistan, and I'm afraid for the last 70 years, we have not even remotely come close to these principles.
Khan Sahib, this is Dr. Moeed Pizada, if you can hear me.
Ji, Moeed.
It's a privilege to be listening to you in a live space. I had the opportunity of seeing you almost every week till July, before I left, June or July or August. But I watched your interview with Tim Sebastian, and like many other interviews which you have given to Western media. And I'm mortified and surprised that someone like you is a modern man who talks of Britain, Scandinavian countries, Nelson Mandela, European history, and American history, is very easily tagged as a pro-Taliban, as a medieval, primitive mindset. What have you done wrong to send this impression? I really fail to understand. What have you done wrong?
Well, Moeed, look, good thing you're not here. Otherwise, you would be behind bars right now. So good that you got away. Look, Moeed, I think in the Western press, the portrayal of Islam is ever since that Iranian revolution of Ayatollah Khomeini. The portrayal of Islam was that they divided Muslims between two categories, fundamentalists and sort of liberals. So Muslims who looked like Westerners became moderates or liberals, and then anyone who was perceived to be religious sort of became a fundamentalist. So it was a bizarre categorization of 1.5 billion people on this earth. And this really started, I can remember after 1979, the fear in the Western countries was that the whole whole Muslim world would be swamped by Islamic revolution, and from their point of view, fundamentalists would take over. And so, first of all, they didn't understand the dynamics of the Iranian revolution. And so it was a black and white categorization of the Muslim world. So when the Taliban came in, they never quite understood the reasons behind how the Taliban took over. They did not even understand the Afghan culture. They did not understand the difference between the rural culture was, especially the Pashtun rural culture. And so they didn't understand when the Taliban took over, what were the circumstances in Afghanistan. No one went into the depth. And so it was a black and white. Taliban were these religious fundamentalists who hated women and so on and didn't like girls' education. And so whenever they ask me questions about Afghanistan, they do not understand that from Pakistan's point of view, our number one priority is that whichever is the government in Afghanistan, Pakistan must have peaceful relationship with them, because we have a 2,500 kilometer border with them. We have 3 million Afghan refugees. And when the previous government was in power, we had 3 different terrorist groups operating from Afghanistan and operating in ISIL, TTP, and then, of course, the Baloch terrorists. So from Pakistan point of view, we want a stable Afghanistan. Whether it was the previous government or the Taliban government, we want stability. Afghanistan has been through 40 years of conflict, and the people of Afghanistan have suffered. Now, from the West point of view, when they talk about human rights, and especially women's rights, it would be much better if the West if they allowed the current Afghan government stream. By isolating them, they're actually removing every leverage they have on trying to influence them on human rights and specifically women's rights. So right now, it's a black and white thing. If you talk about the Afghan government, because Taliban are there, you are then also supposed to be endorsing the treatment, the girls not going to school. But clearly, I mean, any human society, everyone knows, without women's education, how can a society progress? I mean, in our government, my 3.5 years, we give special stipends to parents of poor girls in conservative areas to send their girls to school. We made 6 made for girls so that we could encourage girls' education. Because simple, I mean, our biggest problem right now, just to divert, is our population growth rate. Now, every research shows that if you educate the girl child, necessity for Pakistan, for our future, we must educate our women.
It's also surprising, if I add on the woman issue, that you come from a family in which your sisters are highly educated. They work for international organizations. They are doctors, they're engineers, they're economists. Yet you and the PTI has done the largest Pakistan, the political mobilization of women. This is for the first time that hundreds of women in Pakistan's history have been arrested and are behind bars on purely political charges. Yet your opponents very easily show you and portray you as an anti-woman character across the West, where I live right now.
I don't know, Mohit. I fail to understand that. I don't know. I think it's quite black and white, because I have a very strong faith in God. I'm practicing. I think they just stereotype people that if you're a practicing Muslim and you have faith in God, then you automatically then all the other things follow, that you must be, in the Western eyes, you must be against women. You must be sort of very against. You must be illiberal. Although, in my opinion, it makes me very liberal. Liberal in the sense that I believe in humanity. I believe, I again repeat, my God is God of all human beings, and my Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, he was a mercy for mankind to bring humanity